Hello, hello, my friends. AmyR here with Prairie Paper and Ink. Welcome back to my face and my card making space. And a card inspired by pattern paper. I've done other videos, in fact, a lot of times when it comes to pattern paper, because I get asked a lot. I used to use pattern paper all the time. All the time. And then I kind of stopped for a few years. And then more recently, I can't resist. You know, people make beautiful pattern papers. And I'm like, add to cart. Anyway. A lot of times, though, even though I don't use pattern papers, I'm inspired by them. You know, I'll flip through my stash, I'll see ones online, and, you know, the patterns or the colors, like something will just get the ideas flowing. So I had pulled out this random pack, and I'll show it at the beginning of, like, the making. And I had intended to use it. And as I was flipping through it, I was like, you know, and the ideas started to go. And instead of using the paper, I made a card just inspired by it. So something kind of fun. And yet again, I used this background stamp. I've been fixating on it like I tend to do with things. And I've done many videos using this background stamp. And I combine it with another one and some oldie but goodie favorites and all the things. So, as always, everything I used will be listed and linked in the description box below the video. My links are affiliate links. That just means that if you click on one of my links and end up ordering something, I do get a little kickback from that at no extra cost to you. That is what helps pay the bills, keeps my heaters going, enables me to keep bringing out content. And that's it for the housekeeping. Let's get into making the card. So I had pulled out like my main products for this card, which is that Pepita background, the old letter background, and Divine Peony wafer die, which I'll get back to those in a minute. And then this is the pattern paper. So this is the Paper Rose Artsy print collection. And I'll put a link to it, even though I didn't use it, but I'll put a link to it. It is gorgeous paper. And you saw those black and white stripes. That's probably what pushed me to order it in the first place when it first came out. But yeah, I was flipping through it because I was going to just use the black and white stripes, and I flipped it over and I was like, oh yeah, look at these colors. So pretty. So, like I said, I didn't use the paper at all. I was inspired by the colors, and there was kind of some of the way the patterns were layered. So I was like, So I took that Pepita background and just put it face up on my desk. And I inked it up with Simon Says Stamp's Pawsitively Saturated ink in flannels, so just a lighter gray. And then I'm pressing a panel of Simon's smooth white 120 pound cardstock. Press that into there. And then remove that background stamp. And then I'm going to use the old letter background stamp. And then this one I inked up with the next shade of gray ink in that trio. This is Earl, so just a shade darker. And then same thing, press the background into it. And then I was like, So, like I said, this is just Simon's smooth white cardstock, it's 120 pound. It's heavyweight. This is like pretty much my go-to white cardstock. Y'all have seen me use this in a bajillion videos. But it is cardstock. It is not watercolor paper, and it's not, you know, like a specialty paper like Tim Holtz heavy stock, you know, things that are meant for water, you know, lots of layers, techniques, things like that. However, you can still do things like I'm just showing right now, you know, ink smushing, things like that. It's going to depend. I was somewhat conservative with my ink smushing here because this is just basic cardstock. I highly recommend just testing it out, you know, when you want to do different things. You know, because it's just paper, test it out, see what happens. Because some papers can hold up to some ink smushing, maybe even a tiny bit of watercoloring, you know. Sometimes they won't at all. It literally just, it depends on the brand, it depends on the type, and it depends on what you're doing. I did a fair bit of ink smushing on this, and I knew for the most part that this would hold up. You'll know if it doesn't because the paper will start to like pill, you know, so it'll start like coming off, like splitting apart, curling up, you know, really, really bad, things like that. It can vary. It would literally just depend on what you're doing and the type of cardstock. But that's usually why, you know, when I say like surface matters, the paper matters, because a lot of times different types work for different things. But this worked, but I didn't, as you can see, I'm not like doing super heavy layers. So I just used a little my little ink smushing sleeve, which is just a storage sleeve. And I smushed 3 different colors of positively saturated inks onto it, sprayed a bit of water, and then pressed it here and there onto this background. And I'd used charcoal ink, which was the dark gray, and then butter ink, and then clay, which was the kind of terracotta color, and set it aside, and it's fine. Like, that cardstock held up. I wouldn't do a whole lot more to it in terms of like adding water, etc. But yeah, it worked. If I was going to redo it, I'd probably just choose watercolor paper and save myself like, oh, is this going to work? But also, you never know. That's why I always kind of try to encourage people, like, just test it out. You never know. Sometimes you might hit upon a neat combo of something that works really well. It can happen. And it's paper and ink, you know? Have fun with it. So I set the background aside and I die cut more of the same cardstock using the Divine Peony wafer die. This came out a while ago. I've done at least one video on it. I couldn't find any other ones before I did this voiceover anyway. I thought I'd use this more because I love this. It's a large floral. Again, are we surprised? Seriously. It's beautiful. I love it. So I stuck the die cut pieces to my grip mat. And then for these, I'm just doing ink blending. And I did bubblegum ink first, which was light pink. And then taffy ink, which is the darkest. And then here I'm layering iris on top. Oh, this combo. Love. Positively saturated inks are transparent. Pretty much all the regular stamping inks that we have are transparent. Like these ones, Concord 9th, Altenews Fresh Dye inks, regular Distress inks, etc. are all transparent. So you can layer these colors, you know, and create different looks, different blends, different colors, just layering the inks. So that combo of the bubblegum, the taffy, and then the iris ink, just, I don't know, it speaks to me. It's like pinky purple deliciousness. I love it. So then for the greenery, I used Aspen, which was the lightest green first. And then I'm going in here with Pine. And then I'm going to add Mist, which is like a bluey teal sort of color. And again, that combo, love it. And these colors, that's where I was inspired by the pattern paper. Like I pulled all these inks because they were, you know, some of the colors in that pattern paper, and then just blending them like this. And I had fun. I had fun. They're just pretty. And then for the flower center, I used that clay ink, which I'd use for the ink smushing. And then I'm going to add cocoa to it because I didn't want it to be quite that orange. And then same thing, just blended them together and let them do their thing. So once I've got all the ink on all of the pieces, I can then assemble these little die cuts into this just gorgeous flower. Love so much. So I'm just going to use my craft tacky glue for that. Got to unclog it as always. And press those layers together. And yeah, this just, that iris color, that purple on top of the taffy blended together. Yummy. It's just yummy. So once I've got the floral assembled, the little bud, and then that just adheres, super simple. So get those all adhered together, let that glue dry. And then for my background, I'm going to trim this down a bit. It was originally A2 sized, and I'm trimming it down to like 3 3/4 by 5 inches. Once I've got that trimmed down, I can adhere these little floral and greenery elements onto it. And I popped thin foam squares just under like the bud. And then I just use my craft tacky glue and everything else. So just the bud will be popped up a tiny bit to give it that little bit of dimension. And then adhere the greenery bits just with glue. And then the big floral, I'm also going to pop up with thin foam squares just to give it that little extra something. So once I've got these adhered into place, of course we're going to do splatter. Like, this is what we do. So I'm going to put that in my splat box. I'll start with my white gouache, because of course we're going to do more than one kind of splatter. So put a bit of white gouache onto my little palette. I'll add some water to it with my little fan brush, and then swirl that around until it's thinned out a bit. So I've got a good consistency. And then I add a pretty heavy amount of the white gouache to this card, because you guys know, go big or go home. It's fun. So I'm going to splatter that all over this card front. And then I'll clean off my fan brush, and then I'm going to switch to black gouache, which very intense, do not need very much of. And the black gouache especially can stain. That's basically what's all over this palette. Like, I clean this palette when I'm done using it, but that's how stainy this black gouache is. So just always keep that in mind. I love it. I really do. It just, I'm careful with it. Don't get your elbows in it, you know, that, yeah. Anyway, thin that out. And then I only added a light amount of this. I didn't go crazy. I just added a bit. So splattered that on with my fan brush. Same thing. Cleaned off my palette, cleaned out my brush, let that dry. And then for my sentiment, another not oldie favorite. This is one of the newer ones. This is the CZ Design Thank You Basics set. Love. I had white heat embossed it onto some black cardstock, and then I just used one of the Simon Says Stamps, like sentiment label wafer dies, to die cut that. And then I pulled some baker's twine from my stash because this pink one went very well with that pink combo I blended on the flower. So I wrapped that around this panel, and then I end up, of course, using my reverse tweezers, because you start the knot and then you use the reverse tweezers to pinch that closed and hold it in place. And then I can fiddle and make my little bow here. And because I had already adhered down all the greenery, I am going to very carefully sort of peel up that large leaf, because I don't know, I just didn't want the baker's twine to go over top of it. I wanted it underneath. So I say carefully because there's all that piercing detail in that die cut, and the glue has dried completely by this point, and the glue is strong. Like, the glue is strong. It will tear everything, but you can't see, obviously, you know, if the recipient wants to, like, pull that leaf up and check, okay. Anyway, I just very carefully, like, peeled that up a bit so I could just tuck that baker's twine a little further down, because it needed to be in that spot right there so that the sentiment could go right there. You know, method to the madness. So once I got the baker's twine where I needed it to be, I'm going to add the thin foam squares to the back of this sentiment as well, just again to give it that little bit of dimension. Plus, it just evens everything out just a bit because I've got, you know, baker's twine and die cuts and things in the way. So we're going to get that adhered into place, just like so. Could have used the regular white dimensionals, but I've got the black ones, so it just keeps everything a little extra, I guess. Anyway, once I have that, I also pulled out my, again, one of my favorite little wafer dies, the little etched dragonfly. I've used this one in dozens of cards, dozens of videos. Will always be a favorite. I die cut the body from a scrap of the same black cardstock. The wings I die cut from Simon's Shimmer Vellum. So the wings have that little bit of shimmer to them. Lerv. And then just teeny little tiny bit of glue. And you just adhere them. And then you've got this cute little dragonfly. I love him. I really do love this die. It's so perfect. So once I've got him assembled, I just wanted to figure out like where I was going to place him on this card. And yeah, didn't want him there. Decided to have him kind of coming towards the flower at that angle. So I'll put some adhesive just behind the body. The wings I leave, and then I'm purposely kind of gently curling them up with my fingers. That'll, you know, again, give it dimension without having to add any sort of adhesive or anything like that. So then I can just press him into place and then let that dry. And then he's good to go. So set that aside. I pulled out the Pepita background again. And this time I'm going to ink it up with that same light gray ink, the flannel ink, but I'm using my blending brush this time to add the ink. This just gives it a softer look, and it'll be even softer when it's fully dry because these inks soften and dry back. So I inked it up with the blending brush, and then I'm pressing another panel of the white cardstock into it. Didn't bother inking up the stamp perfectly. Didn't bother pressing down perfectly. I don't care. The texture just gives it that extra something. And then I trimmed it down. So this is also like 3 3/4 by 5 inches. And I'm stamping another sentiment from that Thank You Basics set. And I'm going to just stamp that with some VersaFine Clair Nocturne ink. And then Big Mama foam tape on the back of the card front panel. This will also give just a bit of dimension, not a ton of bulk, because this foam tape is really thin. My absolute favorite. Love this stuff. So I put this across the back of the card front, and then my card base is black cardstock. Simon Says Stamp started doing this, I forget when. I think it was last year, at some point. Pre-cut and scored card bases in a bunch of different colors of their cardstock. Now, I don't normally do side fold cards. It's just a habit. I just prefer top fold cards. It's how I do what I do. I don't know. It's just there's no rhyme or reason, really. And yeah, but these, convenient. Didn't have to bother cutting down cardstock. You can't mess with the convenience. So I used the black card base and then adhered that card front with the Big Mama foam tape and then the inside panel with the craft tacky glue. And then I'm adding some of the newer Clematis confetti, which that color just went perfectly with that color blend. I love when things just work out. That wasn't my intention, and it's like, oh, these are just meant to be. And then my final little bit of embellishment, I pulled out, this is a Twinkle Stickles. Stickles have been making an appearance again on my channel. I've always loved stickles. They're so fun. And I was very lightly applying. And this is another thing, depending on what you're doing, you might want to test this out. Because these inks are water reactive. Same like all the other ones I'd mentioned. So adding something like stickles to them will change the color. I was fine with that. I'm only applying it to the edges of the petal. I applied it to the body of that little dragonfly die cut. That's fine. It's not going to change. But everywhere else that I'm applying it on this die cut flower, the color is going to change because as the stickles dry, it's going to absorb and react with those inks. And I was fine with that because it'll give the edges of everything a lighter look. And you can really see that in the photos at the end. So I just very lightly applied it to just the edges of all the petals. And then I kind of tapped it off a bit with my finger. So I'm getting a bit of sparkle, but I'm not getting the bulk because you can make stickles quite dimensional. And then, yeah, as they dry, it will react a bit more and lighten up the ink even more than what you're seeing now. You see it more in the photos. So it's just another one of those things to kind of keep in mind. Test it out, add your ink to a scrap of paper, put some stickles over it, let it fully dry, see what happens, So that was the finished card. So we got all kinds of a crazy amount of texture going on and just a very different, for me anyway, color combo. And yeah, it was fun. It was fun. So like I mentioned in the beginning, I'll have links to all of the things in the description box below the video, so you can check them out if you're interested. Thank you all so much for hanging out with me, and I will see you all very soon in the next video. Bye. Thank you so much to my amazing Patreon supporters. For anyone that might be interested in joining my Patreon community and supporting me, the link to my Patreon is in the description box below the video. For everyone else, as always, thank you all so much for taking the time to watch my videos, for thumbs upping, commenting, subscribe if you haven't, I'd love to have you. And here's a couple other videos for you to check out in case you missed them. Bye!